And we're back. Ready for round 2?
Sure, let's go. So to start things off, I would like to extend a personal thank you to Morse Code 980 and Power of Friendship 2.0 for mentioning this one. I started playing the Assassin's Creed series with Liberation. I figured that was a safe place to start since Sony included it in one of the Vita's console bundles. I'm not sure if I could disagree more with that decision, as I think Liberation is a fantastic showcase for everything I find wrong with the Vita, with poor technical performance and forced, awkward gimmicks. While I have played the much better version of Liberation that's available on Switch, the Vita one caused me to discount Bloodlines to an insane degree. Liberation got recommended to me quite often, and I've also seen people praise Bloodlines in a similar way. Figured it was just people blindly recommending the popular thing that they like. That seems to be a problem with the Assassin's Creed series in general. Bloodlines is also on weaker hardware, so yeah, there was just no way this one was going to be any good. I am happy to report, however, that I was very, very wrong. Upon starting up, the game displays a message talking about saving to the memory stick. PSP games typically do this for creating a new save file, so I just hit OK and didn't read it. I was then met with a second prompt, which, when I actually read it, I realized it was for save data creation. Turns out that first one was actually for data install. This is a feature that lots of PSP games use to reduce the load times by storing some data on your memory card. This process usually takes a while, but Bloodlines did it so fast I mistook it for standard save file creation. When I got into the game, I was totally blown away. This is one of the best performing PSP games I've seen. It doesn't have the best graphics, but it's very smooth with minimal visual tearing. In my opinion, gameplay is king, so if you've got that, you're already golden. Now that the initial shock is out of the way. Assassin's Creed Bloodlines is a direct sequel to the events of the very first Assassin's Creed game, so you might be a little lost if you haven't played that one already. I got lucky and it was on sale on Steam and runs flawlessly on the Steam Deck, so I was able to grab it for this video. Bloodlines plays like a simplified version of the original, but everything still feels right. I'm honestly really impressed by how little of a control compromise there is. When you hold L, you'll swap the symbol buttons from actions to camera controls, and being able to rotate the camera while walking as if you actually had a second stick is crazy for PSP. Really something you take for granted on other systems. Bloodlines definitely feels like an Assassin's Creed game, and most of the old rules from the first game still apply. Climb up to a synchronization point for each area to unlock different missions to take on. These areas are much smaller and are admittedly not as populated as other Assassin's Creed titles, but having performance this good while keeping the experience intact is really impressive. You can also connect Bloodlines to the PlayStation 3 version of Assassin's Creed 2 for some bonuses, which were then carried over to the various re-releases that game got. But both the original and Bloodlines don't have any type of re-release, so having it still be exclusive to PSP and this good is a real treat. It's worth playing even if you've never played the other games.
So, last time I covered Midnight Club 3 on PSP, while curious about the following entry, LA Remix. In execution, it's largely similar, another open-world racer, but the experience is much smoother overall. You get into the action very quickly this time, with little to no exposition, and remember those absurd loading times? Significantly shorter here. In LA Remix, you'll find more than the familiar city streets. There are now gated areas, small shopping malls, and parking lots. You know, the kind of stuff you'd expect to see. It's realistic. There's also more city destruction, and, as you've likely noticed, a full day-to-night cycle. Midnight Club 3 was rated E10+, while LA Remix is rated Teen. The reason for that is probably all the bad-mouthing from your opponents. Doesn't matter if you win or lose, they're always on edge, which helps give the illusion of actual competition that I think greatly enhances the game's atmosphere.
All I'm seeing here is a whole lot of average, bro.
I also appreciate the varied soundtrack. Midnight Club 3 had mostly rap hits, which is cool, don't get me wrong, but LA Remix has plenty more to offer. If I were to choose between the two games, I'd pick LA Remix any day.
Light, give me strength.
This is it!
Dissidia Final Fantasy, otherwise known as Dissidia, is a fighting game featuring the main heroes and villains of the first 10 Final Fantasy games. At least, that's what it is on paper, as this is unlike any fighting game you've likely ever seen. If I was going to compare it to anything, it's like the PSP's version of something that has the same level of presentational quality as Super Smash Bros. Melee. Combat occurs in a fully 3D space, and you have two types of attacks. One of them increases this number right here, while the other expends it to deal damage. It's not much more complex than that, but this game does a weird thing where it opens with a tutorial for basic actions, but it doesn't actually require you to do them in order to progress, so you end up not really learning anything. Seriously, it took me about 2 hours of playing the story mode before I got a decent grip on how to actually play. I've never really seen a tutorial do this before. The story mode is pretty interesting too, letting you pick and choose battles on this chessboard type space. You get an infinite amount of moves, but clearing each section before this counter hits 0 earns more rewards. You can also customize your character a large amount through equipment and even their moveset. The game looks fantastic. All of the characters' designs have been translated beautifully into 3D. This is also the first time many of them got voice actors, which they did a fantastic job at casting.
If the treasure were really that easy to find, it wouldn't be a treasure hunt, would it?
Fucking nailed it. This is exactly what I imagined this little shit from 9 sounding like. If you're a Final Fantasy fan but have never played this, you're gonna have a blast. I did, however, run into this white screen issue I couldn't find a solid answer to.
The balance was broken.
It happened twice during the 2 hours I played. Seems like data install solves it, but I didn't test that as it never caused me any major progress loss. Speaking of which, this is one of the only times I've seen a PSP game that has different levels of data install. That must have been really nice back in the day when storage space wasn't so readily available. Dissidia's got a sequel called Dodecum that's widely regarded as one of the best PSP games, but the original has its charms that I think make it worth playing too. Hey, what's up? It's me from the editing phase. So I've looked into this game a little bit more, and as it turns out, this game does the Castlevania Legacy of Darkness thing, where it technically has a retelling of the first game's story inside of it. So at a cursory glance, most people would say, oh, well, this makes the original version obsolete. But you know, I'm a big fan of Legacy of Darkness. I've played both that and 64, and I would say if you like that game, you should play 64, because 64 is pretty different. There's a lot of like mechanics changes. Some of the level designs are radically changed in the remake. It's not the same experience. And I feel the exact same way with these games, but unfortunately I can't 100% confirm that because I don't own the sequel, so I have no way to check. But I just wanted to make sure that was in there. O12, Dodecum, Dodecium, whatever you want to call it, I don't know how to pronounce it. It's got this game inside of it. So if you wanted to skip it, you could. But considering the fact that I only played this one and I think it's pretty damn good, I just play whatever one you can get your hands on. They're both good choices. As far as I'm concerned, these two games are the PSP's version of Smash Brothers. You owe it to yourself to check them out.
I won't sleep well tonight.
Ghost Recon Advanced Warfighter 2. This here is a fairly simple, over-the-shoulder shooter where you navigate small open-world environments in pursuit of completing objectives. You'll plant bombs, attack enemy convoys, save wounded soldiers from a helicopter crash, and so forth. The story is nothing to write home about. It's really as generic as it gets for this sort of thing. But your frequent communication with HQ brings some personality to it.
Good job, Mitchell.
The AI is incredibly stupid, often clueless to your presence. Make no mistake though, when they hit hard. But checkpoints are quite generous, so no big deal. Still, best to be careful here. Ghost Recon on PSP is more of a guilty pleasure. There's not many shooters on this platform in the first place, so you kinda take what you can get on PSP. Just be aware that most shooters on this platform require use of the face buttons to move the camera due to its lack of a second analog stick. It works, but I'd suggest using a PS Vita for these instead, as you can then custom map the face buttons to the other stick.
Okay, so I played this one a long time ago, and I remember thinking it was too hard and that I didn't care for it at the time. I was kind of dreading revisiting this one, but man, this is way funner than I remembered. Twisted Metal Head-On is a chaotic car combat game and one of the most recognizable Sony IPs thanks to Sweet Tooth. Sorry, Needles Kane. Although it doesn't seem like Sony themselves can even decide on what his name is. Anyways, yeah, this is great. You travel from place to place taking out your opponents in an effort to earn one wish. Locations are just the right size and packed with special weapons for you to use on your foes. If you poke around, you can usually find bonus levels that present you with unique challenges for extra lives or unlockables. Every character has their own special weapon and ending, and sometimes the game lets you choose the next stage, so this thing is just built for replayability. Each character also has a bio that tells you where they're coming from and why they're entering the tournament, which does wonders for the world building. Seriously, I love when games include stuff like this. On top of all of that, the game's got some pretty difficult bosses that really put your skills to the test. Twisted Metal Head-On is awesome and would be an easy recommendation, if not for one major flaw. So, the game has this issue where most of the sound effects will randomly cut out during gameplay. I initially thought it was an anti-piracy thing since I'm playing in ISO, but no, this is just an issue with the game. Come to think of it, I remember this happening back when I still used the discs. I couldn't find any community patches to fix this, and Sony never took care of it even though this got a greatest hits release. It's a little disappointing, but the music is fire as hell, so it doesn't spoil the experience. This one's got a PlayStation 2 port with some extra content, but from what I heard, they really messed with the music in this version. I don't know for sure as I haven't played it yet, but you might want to stick with the PSP release despite this glitch. It's one of the best games on the system regardless. Also, I know this has nothing to do with the video, but you should go check out the Twisted Metal Peacock series. It's way better than I expected. Twisted Metal in general deserves more attention, and I'm hoping the success of this show might get us some more games.
This is gonna be fun!
Mercury Meltdown. Imagine, if you will, Super Monkey Ball turned into a puzzle game with elements of Sokoban. Here you play as a Mercury blob that can roll, split, and change colors. You can even combine the colors of split Mercury for something more unique, as is often required in order to finish a level. The more Mercury you have, the slower you move, but try not to lose much, because the more you have at the end, the better your score. Also, be careful around those edges. I found that's the easiest way to lose. There are some tricky items to collect on each map, so if you love a good challenge, that'll do it for you. I should mention the game's funky, experimental soundtrack, which gives a wacky feel to it all. There are so many extras in this game, none of which I unlocked, sadly. If you're a fan of puzzlers, and/or platformers, this is a must-play.
Most of the Diablo likes on PSP are said to be not great. Admittedly, I only have passing familiarity with the one that was a launch title, which did not impress me in the slightest, but I think I found one that's worth taking a look at. Warriors of the Lost Empire is an action RPG dungeon crawler with beat-em-up style combat, and the dungeons all appear to be static, so it's not a roguelite. There's 3 difficulties that buff the enemies, but the floor plans are always the same. The combat is really straightforward, admittedly not much different than an East title. I also like the portrait arts and the game's music quite a bit, but it's a little lame that it restarts the track with each new floor. If it ran continuously, I could get lost in this game really easily. Dude, you guys aren't gonna believe who made the music for this. Yeah. There's no money to collect, but enemies drop items that get used in a bartering system. You also can't alter your stats or equipment while you're in dungeons, so this game's hub area is more important than it normally would be. There's also an ad hoc multiplayer mode if you want to tackle dungeons together or trade items with another player. I also tried it out on my Vita to see if I could map the camera controls to the second stick. This game maps it to the control pad, which typically isn't that bad, but it's a little awkward here. It felt a little better on Vita, but I noticed it's really easy to overshoot, probably to make using the control pad a little easier. It'll probably take some getting used to, but playing this on Vita seems like a highly preferable experience. I also saw that as you beat the game with each class, there's an alternate costume you can unlock. So other than the raised difficulty, there's an incentive to keep replaying. Warriors of the Lost Empire's got some cool ideas, but overall, it's just okay. I use these types of games to relax and shut my brain off, and I think this game does just fine at that. You should give this one a shot if you're looking for something that's not the typical Diablo-like. So that was originally where this segment ended, but in the comments of the first video I saw a few mentions for Dungeon Siege Throne of Agony. I've seen this one get recommended for years, but for some reason I had it saved in my head as being a bad game made by Square Enix, which, no, literally neither of those are true. I'm not sure what was going on here, but I bought a copy so I could finally put this to rest. I see we've got New Game Plus and characters with predetermined classes. If you're coming from the previous video, you already know how I feel about the latter, but I'm also a big fan of New Game Plus modes, so this looks right up my alley. Throne of Agony is more like a traditional Diablo like you'd find on PC, but if it had a console port. So instead of clicking somewhere to make your character go there, you control them directly with the analog stick. The levels in this one feel way more organic than the rigid, squared levels of Warriors of the Lost Empire, and the game is structured more like an adventure game. You've got an overworld that leads to different areas to clear, and it's got a lot of the typical stuff: carrying capacity, customizable stat points upon level up, and loot with different parameters. It's also got a normal money system, so it's really easy to relax into the typical grind of gathering stuff and selling it off that these type of games are known for. It also looks pretty decent for a PSP game, with lots of 3D models dotting the landscapes, although I wish the camera was pulled back a bit more. It's kind of too close, but you get used to it. I also wish the map was a little more useful. It's kind of easy to get lost, and I don't know, like, I was able to adapt to it, but it's just weird. I don't know why they did it this way. I'm not even really sure how to explain it, to be honest. There's a code exchange system with Dungeon Siege 2 Broken World, which means it has pseudo connectivity features with a PC title, which I don't think I've actually seen in a PSP game before this. I only played for about an hour, but I explored the first town and ended up finding a pretty large, completely optional area. This is awesome, and I love adventure games that do stuff like this. It's easy to see why people have been recommending this, and I definitely would to those looking for Diablo-likes on PSP. So, there you go. 2 options for 1 entry. You should check out whichever one of these appeals to you more. But to be honest with you guys, I'm just happy to report neither of these games are crap like this one is. Again, I know this has nothing to do with the video, but don't play this. This is easily one of the worst Vita games I've ever played.
Daxter. Okay, I'll admit, I have very little experience with this series. All I know regarding the reflective plot here is that Jack and Daxter are separated for some time during the second game, and this PSP side story is meant to fill in the gap. Essentially, Daxter's trying to save Jack from captivity, but is suddenly persuaded by some old dude into taking an exterminator job. Now Daxter will explore different areas of the city to tackle an out-of-control bug problem. You'll find many expressive cutscenes in Daxter, which are consistently charming. I for one love the universe that they've established here, and it makes me want to further explore the console games someday.
That ain't no bug!
Simple as it may be, Daxter's combat is satisfying. After your first 3 strikes, the final attack can be combined with other nearby bugs for insta-kills. They'll then drop skull gems, which you collect as a requirement to finish levels. At least that's regarding the hour or so that I played. There's a fair bit of variety to its gameplay. One time I had to fertilize some flowers with a hovercraft, and there was even this one Matrix-inspired dream sequence. These gimmicks never overstayed their welcome. In fact, I'd say they were the perfect length. The majority of Daxter seems to be on-foot platforming. You may find it tricky to navigate some of the bottomless areas, but there are infinite lives, so that's fine. These environments put Ratchet & Clank's size matters to shame. They went above and beyond with the detail here. To me, Daxter feels like a PS2-era spin-off that wasn't being held back by hardware limitations. The only point where I acknowledged this to be a PSP game was when I explored the small open world, as it's blocked off from bigger parts of the city. Yeah, I'm impressed with this one. Had to convince myself to stop playing once I had enough footage. It's clever, addictive, and frankly beautiful at times.
Pangya Fantasy Golf is a game based off a golf MMORPG from South Korea. The particular iteration Fantasy Golf is based off of is no longer officially supported though, and it appears the current iteration just shut down rather recently. Choose your character, course, and clubs, and let the balls fly with a satisfying... There's an extensive story mode along with tons of extra modes, plenty of customization options, and unlockables. It's the best arcade-style golf game I've ever played. Pangya's quality speaks volumes on a system littered with golf games, especially first-party ones that I think it stands on equal grounds with. I don't have much to say other than that. It's just really good, and as a console exclusive, it's a must-play for PSP owners.
Toy Story 3. Based on the 2010 movie, this PSP adaptation closely follows its events, with a few levels that briefly expand on the existing story. It's technically a watered-down version of the home console game without the toy box mode. Gameplay is fairly linear, despite numerous fetch quests. What makes it so good are the fluid animations and superb attention to detail. Every nook and cranny of this world is believable in context, from the messy bedrooms, living room, garage, and more. Running around familiar human territory while the size of a toy often makes for a fun, comfy experience, and this is no exception. There are numerous exciting set pieces and one-off stages, like this one level where Buzz has to jump from one moving vehicle to another. While the environments are believable, I can't say logic is this game's strong suit.
Andy's mom's right outside. If I just turn on the TV, she'll have to open the door.
Are you sure about that?
As everyone knows, leaving your TV on is just as dangerous as the stove. Does Andy have a Magnavox Odyssey? You'll spend just under 2 hours for a full playthrough here. I think it's a suitable substitute for the home console version, if you're looking for something short to play.
Patapon is a game that's so unique, I'm not even fully sure how to describe it. It's definitely a rhythm game, but mixed with a strategy title that's presented as a side-scroller. You control your units through 4-beat songs that execute different actions, and you choose which song based on what's going on the screen. You have to think about a lot, and if you're like me and don't have the best natural rhythm, it can be a bit overwhelming. My capture setup is also making things a smidge harder, but once you get a grip on things, it's really fun. The Patapon themselves are also really cute despite their warrior tribe nature, and seeing them sing your praises after a successful mission is a great motivator. The music is also incredibly catchy, especially the songs you have to play with the symbol buttons. You can customize your Patapon's equipment and also which units to deploy before each mission. I quickly discovered that even if a unit is stronger than others, some missions are just not made for them. I unlocked these axe guys and tried to take them into the hunting mission, hoping that I could do better, but I ended up finding out that I couldn't defeat a single enemy using them, so I swapped them out for these spear guys and then made a total cakewalk of it. This is the moment it became clear to me that Patapon is the total package in terms of PSP games, consisting of a unique style, fantastic music, and well thought out game design. I have a bit of a unique history with this series. I was buying PSP games in a game shop a few years ago when I mentioned to the owner that I had never played Patapon before. Completely shocked, he then gave me a copy of the first game for free. I then sat it on my shelf for a few years, but I understood the message as I quickly sought out the other entries. Hell, I even managed to get my hands on the second game's somewhat uncommon North American disc release. I decided to finally spend a little bit of time with all three of them for this video, so consider this slot talking about the whole trilogy instead of just the first game. Patapon 2 seems like a bit of a redo of the first one. It even starts in a very similar way to the original, but has a lot of differences and upgrades that make it a more than worthy sequel. I think it could be argued that this one's actually better than the original. I ended up enjoying myself more than the first time around and had to force myself to stop. 3, however? That one gets kinda wild. This one sports a new rock motif, and they give you all of the drum types right at the start. It's clearly intended for fans of the first two Patapons, and its extravagance lets the series go out with a bang. The first Patapon got remastered on PS4, but it seems a lot of people don't care for that version, meaning the games are still best enjoyed on PSP. The Patapon Trilogy is fantastic, and I highly recommend any that you can get your hands on. I now understand why that game shop owner could sing nothing but praise for it. Now if only I could get that rhythm out of my head.
Outrun 2006 Coast to Coast is a cross-platform release for the Xbox, PlayStation 2, and PSP. It's largely based on the arcade game Outrun 2, which is included. The sense of speed you get in this game, man, it's unparalleled. I'm shocked at how quickly the PSP is rendering all this stuff. For a good chunk of the game, you'll be drifting around corners, so try to master it all as you speed through the many highly detailed environments. I could recommend this game for the beautiful scenery alone, more so with an HD display, but having this on the PSP is a huge win. Gameplay varies based on the mode you've selected. You've got the traditional Outrun mode, races against opponents, and the famous Girlfriend mode, where you have to fulfill her specific requests on the road. There's even a mode where you have to stay in the lead, else you'll lose your girlfriend. Very high stakes here, with the appropriate level of silliness you've come to expect from Sega. A version of Outrun 2006 was released on Xbox 360's Live Arcade many years ago, which unfortunately ended up delisted. Not like it really matters with the 360 store closing down. The reason, supposedly, is because of the Ferrari license. I've covered this version in my XBLA series, where I've featured a few other cross-platform PSP games like Space Invaders Extreme, N+, and Platypus. Those are all great titles, especially N+, which is a game that I recommend everyone try at least once.
Now I know what you're thinking.
What the hell is that?
Flat out, this is a hidden gem. Carol Vorderman's Sudoku might just be the best Sudoku game ever made. I made a video on the PSP's various Sudoku games a while ago and came away feeling this one was the best, with its nearly endless amount of content on top of seeming to be able to generate its own puzzles. Most Sudoku games come with preset puzzles, so they're essentially no different than a Sudoku puzzle book you can find at your local grocery store. But this one goes the extra mile by making an experience that could only exist in video game form. It's got an unfathomable amount of content, with a ton of different modes. This is in addition to a difficulty selector and modifiers that affect your playstyle. The game also has a set of tutorial videos hosted by Carol that do a fantastic job teaching you how to solve Sudoku puzzles. I'll die by these because they're actually how I learned how to play, and I've been enjoying Sudoku puzzles ever since. This is all tied together by some satisfying sound design and an intuitive UI. Most Sudoku games are shovelware, but Carol Vorderman's is anything but. Alright, I think that's good. How many games have we discussed now?
Not sure. Maybe like 45 or something?
Yeah, that's more than enough. The PSP's library is massive with over 1,000 games across all regions, so this should give you an idea of how much variety is on the system.
And you guys had some great recommendations too. Like Mercury Meltdown, for example? I completely forgot about that game and just had to include it in this one.
Yeah, I even saw some stuff I wasn't familiar with. I remember somebody recommended a game called Shift Extend, which is one of the minis. I don't see those get recommended too often, so I'll have to try that one out soon. Speaking of which, we got a lot of comments asking why certain games were left out. All of my entries in the first video were games I have had some kind of past experience with, but there were a few that I moved to this video because I'd owned them for a while, but hadn't played them yet. This video originally only had 5 entries, but you guys had so many good recommendations we added a bunch to it, and I even bought 3 brand new games to try. But even with that, it's still impossible to include everything, so I kind of wanted to explain why some of the more obvious games are getting left out. It mainly boils down to 3 different criteria. 1, I don't own it. So stuff like the 2 Mega Man games, I'm aware those are good, but I don't own either of them. It's as simple as that. 2, I haven't played it, or I haven't played it enough to where I'm comfortable giving an opinion. Games like Grand Theft Auto. I own Vice City Stories and have played it a bit, but I wanted to play the original games first since I didn't grow up with them, and then Rockstar delisted all of the original releases and put a broken trilogy in their place, so I'm still figuring out how to approach these. If I can be blunt, it's probably going to be emulation. Mega Man also fits in here as I didn't grow up with those games, but I do own all of the Legacy collections now. Series I'm unfamiliar with, I'll try and find some kind of an in with so I can start playing them. I refuse to talk about games from long-running series without playing other entries first, especially if a PSP game is a direct sequel or a remake, reimagining, or reboot of one. Same with movie tie-in games or the like. I usually try to engage with the source material a little bit first. Number 3. You already know about it. Persona and Monster Hunter. I've actually played every Persona game to some degree, and of the 4 that are on PSP, I'd only wholeheartedly recommend 3 portable. 1 and the 2 duology are fine, but there's various problems with all 3 of them, mainly 1's music and the second half of 2 not being localized. I'm aware there's a patch in both cases, but recommending a patched game can be a hard sell for a lot of people. I tried to recommend ones you could just go out and buy. I personally think all 3 of these need modern, definitive remakes. Portable, on the other hand, is fantastic and has been ported elsewhere more recently, but you should go in blind. That game was one of my most powerful gaming experiences that changed the way I thought about other people, and I don't really want to talk about it unless it's in a dedicated video. You should go try this one for yourself. Monster Hunter I'm slowly getting into thanks to Generations Ultimate on Switch. I had the 3DS one that I used to play with some friends, but I kind of dropped it as we drifted apart. That series has been a rough one for me because I've never liked how deliberate the animation for every move you make has to be, especially in the older games. But Generations is designed for new players, and I've been enjoying it quite a bit. Anyways, the main goal of my entries was to showcase things that people had no clue were worth playing, in addition to some of the more well-known stuff. That's also just my personal preference. I like the road less traveled a lot more. It's also why I recommended God Eater over Monster Hunter. That series needs all the help it can get.
Yeah, I don't have experience with many of those games.
And that's fine. You know, everyone's got their own thing. I've always loved how vast the PSP's library is. It has fantastic games, but I feel like it being a portable console made most people overlook the majority of it. That's how it's always seemed to me anyways. It's always felt like uncharted territory, and I love that.
Oh, I might be repeating myself, but in case you don't already know, you can play PSP games right on your PS Vita using the Adrenaline launcher. Vitas have bigger screens, more control options, and, of course, a bigger library. The Vita's homebrew scene is incredible too. More recently, Sonic 3 Air got ported, which runs smoothly most of the time. I was shocked to find out that mods are supported. I love the ability to play endless custom Sonic mods on the go and in widescreen.
Yeah, most things the PSP does, the Vita does as well, so it also has access to minis and PlayStation 1 classics. If you buy a set of trigger grips, you'll also get access to the full DualShock setup outside of Rumble, which is great for games like Ape Escape, but if your game doesn't need that, they can be enjoyed on PSP too. That's actually how I played the original Crash and Spyro trilogies for the first time. And, you know, then there's UMD movies, but that's a whole other beast entirely.
I think that about covers it.
And before we go, I'd like to give a quick shout out to the third birthday.
Thanks for having me on this time, dude. I had a blast covering these great old PSP games. But I'm gonna head out for now, so I'll talk to you later.
See you, man. We'll have to do this again sometime.
You bet. See you around.